Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Hello there and welcome to episode number 33 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. I can't believe that we're at episode 33. It just seems crazy, but it's so fantastic to have you with me here today. I get so many nice messages and comments about the podcast, and I just want you to know that I'm so very grateful to everyone who listens in. My name's Catherine Eardley. I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. The Resilient Retail Club is my membership group for creative product businesses, and you can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. Just a quick reminder as well, today, the day the episode is going out, is the final day for adding your voice to the survey that I have been running for the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to get as many product businesses as possible to give me the reality of what it's like running a product business. It's a completely anonymous survey. You can fill it out at resilientretailclub.com/survey. If you haven't filled it out, then today's your chance. Please, 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 if you've got 5 minutes to spare, it is going to be so great to pull these results together and get an accurate picture about what it's like running a product business in the UK in 2021. Because let's face it, there's a lot of inaccurate information out there, or just lack of information out there really about what it's really like. This survey, as I said, it's very quick to fill out, but it's pretty thorough. It goes through lots of different questions about your turnover, but about paying yourself, about your website conversion rate, all completely anonymously, of course, just giving you that opportunity to share a little bit of the reality about running your business so that we'll be able to learn from each other. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to pull this together. The next 3 podcast episodes, in fact, are going to be all about the results of the survey. So today's the last day to get your results in, and then I'm going to be crunching the numbers, pulling the key themes and the threads out of the data, and then I'll be sharing it from next Thursday, the 25th of March. I'm going to have a podcast episode going out where I'm going to share the numbers. And then I'm also going to have episodes which are going to cover, there's lots of questions about marketing. So we're going to have an episode about small business marketing. And then there's also going to be an episode about learning really what people's best and worst. At the end of the survey, people are asked like the one thing that's made the real difference, and then one thing that's been a big learning for them or something that they would do differently. And so we're going to have an episode dedicated just to those to really dig into the themes that came out of it. So I'm really, really excited about this project. I feel very strongly about it. I think it's going to be brilliant to get some genuine information that people can use as benchmarking, some realistic information to help understand how product businesses are doing in 2021. I can't wait to share it with you. So do head along to resilientretailclub.com/survey and share your thoughts, add your voice. Okay, on to today's episode. That was a bit of a long-winded intro. But in today's episode, we are going to be talking about something that this was actually a request for an episode. So sometimes I'm having conversations with clients or with members of the Resilient Retail Club, my membership, and people will say to me, please, can you do a podcast episode on this topic? And I got asked by 2 or 3 different people, and I thought, well, okay, that seems like there's something that people would be interested in hearing about. So today is a kind of follow-on from some of the ones that I've done about productivity, and it's really about how do you balance all of the different demands in your business. So how do you manage it? The one person that I had quite a long conversation with about this topic, they were a maker. So basically what they were saying is that they would advertise or they would promote their business, they would make a sale, and they'd have to make it, then they'd have to dispatch it, or if they had a flurry of sales, then they were in this position where they couldn't keep up with things like their social media marketing because they only had a finite amount of time, and therefore they just weren't able to keep the momentum going with lots of different things. So it felt like they were always juggling. And that's what I really wanted to talk about today. How do you get the balance between making your product if you make it, or receiving your product, or designing it if you design it, shipping it out, or doing everything else? If you're a maker or a solo entrepreneur, and then this is one of the toughest challenges, how do you balance your workload where it is just you and you're wearing a lot of hats? And that's what I want to run through today. I'm going to run through a few points about how do you make life easier for yourself, or how do you balance everything if you are wearing all the different hats all the time. We've had previous episodes about being productive, but this one here, I want to particularly answer this specific question about what do you do when you get a flurry of sales and it means therefore that you can't do anything else in your business other than fulfill those sales. So first things first, before we jump in, what I just want to say is that if you get to the point in your business where you'll routinely find yourself holding back from pushing the business, so holding back from going on social media and talking about it, holding back from sending an email because you're almost scared of the sales that are coming in, that is a really, really good indicator that you are ready to grow the business, to get extra help, to get people in to help you, to get support, to start looking at outsourcing things. But that's a really, really good sign, because that is something that I've found. I've done a lot of work in the last year. I'm very pleased to have done a lot of work in the last year with lots of clients who've been on a fast growth path. And one thing that a lot of people talk to me about is this fear of sales coming in, because it just feels overwhelming. I will caveat everything that I say in this episode with, if this is a common problem for you, that you feel like one of the biggest blockers in your business is that you are scared of promoting it because you just don't think you can deal with the influx of sales coming in, then that is your sign to do some serious thinking about how you can bring people in to help you. But let's assume that that's not necessarily the case. This is more just a general idea of how do you manage your workload? How do you balance all of these different demands? The first thing that I would say to you is, if you are struggling with managing your workload, have a think about how you can focus less on quantity and more on consistency. So is it just simply that your demands upon yourself are too great? Are you insisting, or in your head wanting to post every single day on your grid on Instagram? Are you wanting to send an email every week, or write a blog post twice a month, or something like that? But what are you doing in your business? Are you pushing yourself too much? Are you spending too much time on social media, for example, is another big question. So if that is the case, then can you look at a more manageable workload? Are you sure it's the absolute right thing to do? Now, every time you post, you get sales, and it's a really clear link between sales and posting, then obviously you don't want to pull it back. But if what you feel is that you're spinning your wheels because you're insisting on doing all of these things, or maybe you're on a platform, maybe you're insisting that you're on multiple platforms and some of them just aren't generating sales for you, what can you look at in your business to really focus in on the quality and the consistency of what you're putting out, and not worrying so much about the quantity? That's one way that you can try and get yourself some wiggle room too. So that means as well that if you are busier, if it is a busier time for you, if you've got a goal of, right, I want to post once a week on Instagram, then that's much more achievable to do when you're busy than if you've got this feeling of you've got to post 4 times a week or every single day. The second thing about managing your workload is getting really realistic about time. I've talked about this before, but often when people feel overwhelmed, one of the issues is that they are looking at a time frame which is too condensed. So they're trying to do too many things in too short of a time period. So for example, if you know that you want to launch a new website and you want to switch email providers and you want to launch some new products and you want to start wholesaling, if you feel like you've got to do all of those things in the next 4 weeks, then it's going to feel overwhelming and it's going to feel really difficult to manage. So often the answer is to elongate that timescale. Give yourself 4 weeks just to start wholesale outreach. Give yourself another 4 weeks, for example, to bed in with a new email provider. Always assume that everything is going to take you a lot longer than you think it's going to take you. So if you've got these big projects that you're working on in the business, have a think about elongating that time frame. The other thing that can help with this and with your workload in general is just being really realistic about how much time you've actually got. Have a sit down and go through the actual blocks of time that you have got in the week. And sometimes the answer is you just simply don't have that much time to play with, especially if you've got childcare obligations, especially if you've got other obligations, or you're working your business around another job, either full-time or part-time. If you just have other things going on in your life, you have to just get really realistic about how much time you actually have in a week. And then ask yourself, is the reason that you're struggling to manage your workload because you've just got an unrealistic expectation? If you've literally got 4 hours 3 times a week, you've got 12 hours to run your business, then you just have to be really realistic again. And that comes back to this setting the goals, or looking at your consistency and quality instead of quantity. If you've got just a few hours each week, can you really support doing more than one social media channel? Can you really support doing that more than a monthly email, for example? You just have to be realistic and look at the time that you have got. But then let's dig into the question of, well, how do you manage keeping things going when you have to also make things, or you have to dispatch them, or you have to wrap and get things out? How do you also stay consistent with your marketing? And really, I think there's 2 ways that you can do this. There's 2 options. And they're both about time blocking, but they're both about time blocking in slightly different ways. So the first option is that you just say, I have to do a certain amount all the time. So for example, marketing, you're like, I'm going to insist that I have 1 hour a week. That's all you can do. 1 hour a week, and I'm going to do it every single week. And on Mondays, the first thing we're going to do is at 9 o'clock, I'm going to sit down at my desk and I'm going to come up with one Instagram post for the week, and I'm going to write the caption, whatever it is you need to do. And you do it at a set time every single week, and you start with that. So there's a theory about the big rocks and the little rocks. I'm sure you may have heard it. I think it came from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which is definitely a book I highly recommend. I really, really love that book. It has so many great tips and ideas about, well, being effective and efficient. But it's this idea that if you fill a glass with lots of tiny little pebbles and then you try and put big rocks in, you can't fit them in because the little pebbles have taken up too much space. But if you start by putting the big rocks in first and then pouring the little tiny pebbles in over the top of them, then that will allow you to fit things around the most important things in your business. So think about those big rocks. So if you want to really be consistent with your marketing and you have to put in this big rock, 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, for example, I would always pick times when you know that you're going to be able to give it a really good concentrated period of time. So think about those times in your schedule where you can block out some time to put in the things that you really, really want to be consistent with. And then everything else has to work around it. So that is one approach. So mapping out your week, being realistic about how much time you've got, but then identifying those big rock times where you're going to do these big rock tasks, if you like your marketing. And you're going to put them in before you get distracted, before you get sucked into doing other things. I find if I tend to put things at the end of the day, the chances are I might get caught up in something else and it may not get done. So if I want to make sure something's really going to get done, I put it in at the beginning of the day. Other people are different. Other people feel like they need to start the day with going through tasks from the day before or dispatching orders, for example, and then they know if they put something in directly after lunch, then that's when they're going to sit down and focus on it. So identify what your absolute non-negotiables are. Find a time in your diary for them. Make sure it's a time when you're likely to be able to focus. And then mentioned this before when we talked about productivity, but then really focusing, turning off all notifications, turning off your emails, just being really clear about what you want to achieve in that time period in getting it done. So even if you're busy, this is the thing that will feel uncomfortable. Even as it gets busier and you have things you need to do, you're just going to still have to get those big rock tasks done. You're just going to have to make time and make sure that you are focusing in on them. So that is one way to deal with, even when you get busy, making sure that you identify those non-negotiables and getting those booked in and getting them done. The other option is if you're somebody who, for example, does launches or does shop launches, or you have very specific times when you're going to be busy, then what you may find as a better approach is more about time blocking, but really looking at a complete day, for example. So can you find a day in your calendar where you can create all of the social media posts for 2 months, for example? If you're doing one a week, then that's a lot easier, obviously, than if you're doing it on a daily basis. So you may just have to go through and identify, okay, can I find a day when I'm going to be doing this on a particular day, and you get it all done and get it scheduled so that when you know that you're going to be busier at a certain time, you know you've got all of those posts in the bag and you can just literally put them out one by one. As I said, if it's one a week or if it's one every 2 days, however often it is. But basically block it, it's time blocking, but it's blocking it days as opposed to a certain time every week. The advantage of this approach is that you avoid context switching. So context switching is when you're doing your social media posts and then you have to stop and then you dispatch an order and then you go check your emails and then you dispatch more orders. Context switching is a huge waste of time, basically. It's one of the reasons that we end up being less productive, because anytime you stop doing a task and go and do something else, you lose a lot of time kind of getting back into that task, re-establishing that flow, if you like, re-establishing that rhythm and that routine that you're in. So context switching can be a huge culprit for why we end up not being very productive, especially if you end up doing things like social media or getting stuck in your inbox. I know when I'm being really unproductive, it's usually because I'm in my inbox and then respond to emails and then another email comes in and I'll respond to that, or go do something else and then I come back and do another email. And it's context switching is what's really eating up a lot of that bandwidth, that mental bandwidth, and it really reduces your productivity. So the advantage of doing these set days is that, you know, if you have a day where you cut everything out, if you're a maker, for example, and then another day where you sew everything, or another day where you plan out all your emails, or a day where you do all your social media, then that is the kind of thing that, again, avoids that context switching, and it really helps you streamline and focus. The only reason that I find this doesn't work sometimes is, number one, you do have to be pretty organized. You have to sit down and look at a few weeks ahead and work out when you're going to have busy weeks and when you're going to have quieter weeks, and then putting those time blocked days out into times when you've got quieter weeks. The other thing as well is if it's something that you're not really keen on doing, then you may end up finding that day when you have to do all of them at the same time is just unbearable. So, for example, I know in the past I've had time block days and it was writing Instagram captions, for example, and I just found it so exhausting to have to do them all in one day. So I sort of ended up realizing that when I had that day in my calendar, I felt a bit like, not so sure about this. I preferred doing it an hour or two a week. So you'll know yourself what you're going to find easier. Is it going to be easier to have a real cycle where you kind of go, right, this is the day I create all my content. This is the day I do all my packing. Well, you can't really do packing. That is something you have to do as orders come in. But, you know, all of the prep for something, is that going to work better for you? Or is it going to work better for you if you do it all on a weekly basis? You really have to know yourself and know which is going to work better. But either one of these approaches is always going to work more effectively if you take the time to look at a slightly longer time period. So you're not just thinking about what's happening this week, what's happening next week, but you're maybe looking 6, 8, even 12 weeks out to help you really manage your workflow. In fact, one of the things I do with quite a lot of clients is I look at a year, a 12-month period, because then you can start seeing, okay, for example, I know that I need to launch something in January, and I know that October, November, December are a write-off because they're just so busy. So I'm actually going to create that in August, which again, if you just wait until you're in the rush of Christmas and then panic because you don't have anything to launch in January, then that's a very different situation. So I would definitely suggest, if you are someone who struggles with the routine of making and as well as getting other things done, even elongating the time period that you're looking at. So you're even looking at the whole year and thinking about all the things that you can do to get ready for peak, for example, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot more as we move through the year. We're going to have a lot more podcasts and content about getting ready for Christmas, but just to put that idea into your mind. So that's really how I would suggest the best suggestion is be realistic about what you can actually achieve, be aware of how much time you've actually got, be focused as always. It's about finding those blocks of time where you can really switch off and focus on one task. Find your non-negotiables, and if you want to manage things on a kind of week-to-week basis, put those times in preferably at the beginning of the day before you get sucked into everything else. Or look at time blocking a particular day so you can avoid that context switching. The other thing that I would say as well is a couple more things. First off is managing other people's expectations can go a long way to you managing your workload. We get into this idea that we have to be always on, that we always have to respond, but make sure you've got an autoresponder on your email so that if anybody emails you with a customer service query, that you can have something that clearly tells them when you're going to be checking your customer emails so that you don't feel like you have to be constantly monitoring exactly what's going on. Be really realistic, turn off your notifications, turn off your social media, turn off everything else when you're trying to get focused work done for the business. But also, managing people's expectations. A lot of big companies aren't always available in terms of their customer service. So why do you have to be as a small business? And yes, it's nice to have the personal touch. And yes, it's nice that you're the one who's responding to emails. But if it's actually disrupting you and stopping you from growing your business because you're constantly getting sucked into it, then make sure you're being really, really clear on your autoresponder for your email that there's certain times that you'll be checking, and then stick to that. The other thing to think about is, can you actually outsource any of these tasks that are sucking up so much of your time? Now, when we talk about growing our businesses and we talk about outsourcing, I know it's really tricky, and I know it's particularly tricky if you're at that beginning stage where you don't really feel like you can pay yourself, let alone paying somebody else to do something for you. And a lot of people worry because they don't want the sort of stress of managing other people. But there's a whole other ways of getting some help that don't even necessarily involve outsourcing on a permanent basis. It could be a one-time thing, or it could be something that you do just for your peak sales periods. So for example, if you're really, really struggling with getting this consistency between marketing and selling your product, what about if you ask somebody to write you 6 blog posts and you just pay them a flat fee? You get them to do these 6 blog posts for you, and then you get them scheduled in so that you just know that there's one going out each month. And I remember the first time that I actually paid somebody to write blog posts for me, I was just so relieved, because at the time I was having to submit not just my own blog, but I was submitting other blogs on a regular basis. And it was just getting completely overwhelming keeping on top of the writing. And so it wasn't a question of bringing somebody on into the business. It wasn't a question of, having an ongoing support, although I do now have ongoing support. But at the time, it was just really about identifying where the biggest time sucks were for me and working out, could I hand off one piece to somebody else to get it done? So the same thing, have a think for you too. Is it something, for example, if you're really committed to sending out an email newsletter once a month, could you ask someone to write you 3 email newsletters, one for each, one per month for 3 months, and then that's just taken care of, and that's a mental space that's taken care of. So there are lots of ways that you can get help without it being something that has to be a huge responsibility. It could be something you just get somebody to do for you one time, so you've got content in hand, you've got things in hand to help you during your very busy times. I hope that helped. There was a few tips and ideas. I know it is one of the ongoing issues, but really, as I said, bring it back to be realistic. Think about consistency and quality over quantity. Don't feel like you have to keep churning things out. And again, if you know that you've got 1 post going out a week, then it's going to be easier for you to keep going with that, even at times when the business is getting busy in other ways. And as I said at the very beginning of the episode, if you are constantly in a situation where you are overwhelmed by the amount of orders you have coming in and the amount that you have to do in the business, and it's stopping you from pushing yourself and pushing the business forward, then I would strongly suggest that this is a sign that you are ready to bring other people into the business to help support you, and that you may be turning yourself into the bottleneck of growth in your business. So definitely something to think about. If you've enjoyed this episode, then do please come over, follow me on Instagram at Resilient Retail Club. I love it when you tag me in on where you're listening. So do let me see, because it's always so much fun. Please also, if you have a moment, I thank you so much to everyone who has rated and reviewed the podcast. Do hit subscribe so that you're one of the first to know about new episodes as they are released. And if you have a few minutes to go to resilientretailclub.com/survey today, Thursday, the 18th of March, if you're listening to this on the day that the podcast is coming out, then it's the final day to share your thoughts in my survey about what it's like, the reality of running a product business in 2021. And I can't wait for next week's episode when I'm going to be sharing those results with you. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions, or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.